Hey guys, do you like top 100 lists? If you like my 100 greatest books and things of that nature, I think you might like this video, especially if you like science fiction movies. My wife got a new magazine in the mail, Remind magazine, and it goes over the top 100 retro science fiction movies, basically classic science fiction films, and it ranks them in order from 1 through 100. So I thought, hey, let's go over them. Let's go through every single film in here, and I'll talk about a little bit, provide some anecdotes, some stories about seeing the films, and if I think they should be in this list, if I think they should make the cut. I'll talk about a couple that should have been in the magazine, and be sure and let me know in the comments what movies you think they were completely wrong about. There's a couple of video game movies in here that are kind of interesting that they made the cut. But anyway, check it out and let me know in the comments again what you think of the top 100 retro science fiction movies as indicated by the editors and writers at Remind magazine. All right, guys, let's get right to it. 2001, A Space Odyssey at number 1, Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, one of his many masterpieces. I first saw this movie back in the late 80s on VHS on my parents' 25-inch television set. I rented it at Blockbuster. Not the ideal way to see it, but it was still great. Nowadays, with a big widescreen, TVs in high def, that's definitely a way to see this film if you can't go to the movies. It's a slowly paced, cerebral film. If you do plan on watching this, if you've never seen it before, make sure you're in the right mood to see kind of a slowly paced, cerebral film. It's great. It's very rewarding. Blade Runner at number 2, one of Ridley Scott's masterpieces. Again, I'm not going to argue with his choice. I've read quite a few Philip K. Dick short stories and novels. This one's based on the novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And Philip K. Dick's career was very interesting. Early in his career, pretty standard science fiction stuff, and then later his stuff got really surreal and existential. And I like his entire career. The critics tend to like his later works, but regardless, Blade Runner, he does the subject matter justice. Of course, it's quite a bit different from the novel, but still a great film, very stylish. Not going to complain. Great cast. Harrison Ford, gotta love it. Number 3, Aliens. Now, this is really the first one I have a problem with. As much as I like this film, and it's incredibly entertaining, I actually think Alien is a better movie because it's more serious, more straightforward, more plausible, if you will. But still, Aliens, great movie. Number 4, Star Wars. My brother did take me to see Star Wars at the Northeast Mall in a suburb of Fort Worth, and we were just blown away by what we saw. The massive ships spanning across the screen and the very likable characters. And it was so cool seeing this when it really wasn't, we kind of heard of it, kind of knew what it was, but going in, but little did we know we were watching cinematic history. We could tell it looked and seemed different than pretty much anything we had seen previously. Yeah, you could say it's just a sort of a serial, a film-length version of a serial, and it's not much deeper than that, but the characters are just basically stereotypes, but I would call them archetypes instead. And hey, I'm not going to argue with Star Wars at number 4. Incredibly influential, great movie. At number 5, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Now this, again, I might have a little problem with this one. My brother-in-law and I first saw this movie back when it was in theaters in 1991. Back before we had opened our comic shop, or when we were doing card shows together to raise money to open a comic book store. We saw Terminator 2 when we were both disappointed with it. Now, subsequent viewings, I have grown to like this movie quite a bit. As a matter of fact, the second time I watched it, I loved it. But the first time, I thought it was a little silly compared to the original Terminator, and I actually think the original Terminator is a better film. And, but yeah, Terminator 2, it's a little too high at number 5, but it's still great. The special effects are amazing. The action scenes are incredible. And yeah, it's got a much bigger budget than the first Terminator. And I know most people probably like Terminator 2 better than the first Terminator, but for me, the first Terminator just seems more realistic. And I did see the first Terminator in theaters as well. The same theater I saw Star Wars in, saw it with my buddy Bill Pritchett. Number 6, The Empire Strikes Back. Now, I know a lot of you think this should be rated higher than Star Wars because the average Star Wars fan will tell you that Empire Strikes Back is the best film in the series. It's darker, et cetera, et cetera. But, hey, at 4 and 6, I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to, whatever. Either one, you could reverse those and that would be just as fun. But, Star Wars was first, so boom. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Our parents actually took us to go see this, and I was just mesmerized by the characters, by the surreal feeling of it, by the fact that these incredible events were happening to just an average family. It came out the same year as Star Wars. Very much different take on science fiction, much more cerebral, much more grounded on, planet Earth. But a great movie. No arguments at number 7. That's probably about where it belongs. Number 8, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. My aunt took us to see this back in the day, and took us, me and my cousins and my brother and sister, and we loved it. Very charming movie. Drew Barrymore is just adorable in it, and of course it spawned the infamous Atari 2600 game, which a lot of people mistaken or just out of ignorance say it's the worst game of all time. But regardless, that narrative has changed over the years as people have gotten to know Howard Scott Warshaw and heard the story of how it took 5 or 6 weeks to program, and as more of these much worse Atari 2600 games have come to light. Yeah, not the worst game of all time, but definitely a disappointment compared to the movie, at least. To be honest, I wish they just would have made a Pac-Man clone and used Reese's Pieces and E.T. going around eating them. That could have been a better game perhaps, or a more intuitive game, and whatever. But E.T. at number 8, an incredible movie. I love it, and I never get tired of watching it. Number 9, Planet of the Apes. Now, I might have actually put this one in the top 5. It's philosophical. It deals with religion and evolution and man's place in the world and speciesist. It's just, I love this movie. Saw this for the first time at my cousin's house when I was a kid. Just a big living room full of us were gathered around the TV watching Planet of the Apes. And I actually got to hang out with Charlton Heston one time for 2 hours when I worked at Walden Books, and told him how much I admired his films. And that was great because it was my job to assist the people that were there with books to promote. Charlton Heston had written a book about the Bible, and he was there at Walden Books promoting it, signing autographs, and it was my job to hand him the books and to make sure he was taken care of while we were, during the autographing. That was amazing. I never never thought I'd be able to hang out with one of my heroes, one of my childhood heroes for a couple hours. That was amazing. Now, there we go. Alien at number 10. In 1979, I was in 6th grade, if I recall, and I was 12 years old, and Alien was the talk of the school. Maybe it was junior high. I don't remember. Anyway, around 6th, 7th, 8th grade, it was the talk of the class. A few lucky kids had seen Alien. Their parents had taken them to see it. I hadn't seen it. But man, the buzz surrounding this movie about the chest bursting and all that stuff, and the incredible looking aliens with the the liquid look, the liquid coming off their fangs, and just, we hadn't seen anything like that before. This was scary, and again, it had kind of a plausible feel to it, which is why I prefer it to Aliens. It's more serious, and just the fact it has such a great feeling of them being, stuck in outer space, and thousands and thousands of miles from Earth, and it just such an incredible movie. Such a great feeling of desolation. Kind of reminds me of Metroid a little bit, as far as just being in outer space, alone, basically, just a few people in the crew. The way Samus is alone in space against these improbable odds with this great atmosphere. Kind of reminds me of Alien in that sense. Great movie. No problem with it being highly ranked, although I think that it should be higher. The Matrix is a great movie, not just the bullet effects or whatever, not just the amazing special effects, but it's super entertaining. It's just a ton of fun. It's really stylish. The characters, the special effects, and the script are all very stylish. I saw this at the theater, and it was an amazing film to see when it came out. Number 11, no problem with that. Back to the Future at number 12. That's a great spot for it. I consider that in many ways the perfect film because I can't think of a way to make it better. Yeah, it's very Hollywood. It's very clean and sweet and colorful and polished. Just it's basically the opposite of something like Terminator or Alien, it's which are gritty. This is just a very squeaky clean movie, but man, it works. It's just such a joy to watch. And again, I never get tired of it. I did see this at the theater and loved every minute of it. Solaris, there's another cerebral, slowly paced film. I've seen most of the films in this magazine. There's going to be probably a couple that I haven't seen that I'll discuss with you. Solaris, I saw it on cable television back in the day because I'd read in Starlog or somewhere how good it was. And when I had a chance to watch it on cable, I definitely checked it out. 14, Jurassic Park, 1993. I took my wife and I, or then my girlfriend, Carice, we went to go see it. And it was just astonishing how realistic the dinosaurs looked. You know, I was used to dinosaurs from like Valley of the Guanji or Land of the Lost or some of the old movies, or sometimes they would just have, you know, like lizards and stuff in place of dinosaurs for the really cheap movies. But Jurassic Park, just incredible. To this day, the dinosaurs look amazing. So just on the special effects alone, and it's a really nice action-packed story that's tense. You know, I have no problem with this at number 14. I don't think that's too high or too low. Number 15, The Terminator. Again, I would switch Terminator with Terminator 2, 1984. When my friend Bill and I went to go see The Terminator, we didn't know what to expect. We heard it was science fiction. We had seen an ad or something for it and just kind of heard a little bit about it. There wasn't much hype surrounding The Terminator. It was a low-budget film. Arnold Schwarzenegger was known as a bodybuilder, and Conan the Barbarian. He wasn't, you know, incredibly, you know, household name, world famous like he became later. And it was a little bit of a unknown film, relatively speaking, but we did go see it at the Northeast Mall where I saw Star Wars, and we just sat there floored because it was so tense, so briskly paced, for such a low budget movie. The effects look great, and it's just so intense. And man, amazing film. Terminator, I'd push it up a few notches. Number 16, The Day the Earth Stood Still. From a purely objective standpoint, I would say this is the best film of the 1950s. My favorite is probably Forbidden Planet, but The Day the Earth Stood Still has a better script, and it has more implications for real world issues like, you know, if humankind, you know, continues waging war and reaches into outer space, you know, they're gonna, you know, Gord and Klaatu are gonna, you know, squash us like a bug. We're gonna be reduced to a burnt cinder. Robert Wise, who's directed a lot of mainstream films and non-science fiction films, did an amazing job with The Day the Earth Stood Still. Just great. Just if you have a problem with this movie being on this list, I'm sorry. Now, these are all retro films. You notice there's not, as I mentioned in the, you know, in the introduction, these are the top 100 what they call retro films, so classic films. Retro is starting to mean vintage, but that's okay. Languages do evolve. The Thing at number 17, this was another blockbuster rental back in the day. It's a remake of The Thing from Another World. And this is one of those, you know, the 1950s movie with James Arnaz. The Thing with Kurt Russell, this is actually one of those remakes that I prefer to the original. Even though I love 50 science fiction movies, The Thing is a better movie. It's just more intense. Love it. Number 18, Metropolis. This was another rental. I had heard it was an amazing film, and I had a book published. I had a magazine published by Starlog that was just sort of a index of science fiction movies with just capsule write-ups, sort of like my classic home video games books. And Metropolis was one on there that they highly touted, and I watched it. It was great. Again, this is another one that's better in widescreen because it's really a vast production. But it's one of the greatest silent films of all time, and I think it belongs in the top 20 for sure. No complaints there. Number 19, The Bride of Frankenstein. If I had to pick a single creature from the Universal classics, it would be The Bride of Frankenstein. She's my favorite. Even though she just has a few minutes of screen time and they didn't bring her back in the series, all those Universals of the 30s and 40s, she's only in The Bride of Frankenstein. She's brilliantly played by Elsa Lanchester. She looks great. Just an incredible, iconic look. My second favorite, a very close second, is the Frankenstein monster. So, of course, I love The Bride of Frankenstein. Some might argue that the original Frankenstein is a better film because it's a little more serious. You don't have the cackling Una O'Connor, but it's just spectacular. It's a great looking film, and it's of the Universal classics. I would put it right there with Frankenstein as the number 1 and 2. You can swap those out as my favorite two from that series. Number 20 is Contact. I think that's a little high. I did see that movie on cable, and it's fine, and I like Jodie Foster, so there you go. A Clockwork Orange. Got another Stanley Kubrick film here, and it's a masterpiece. It's very strange. It's a lot different than the rest, most of the rest of the films on this list. It's not your typical science fiction work. Just watch it. I don't want to give anything away. It's got several iconic scenes, and it's dark, and it's basically, I've heard people say that the message behind the film, I don't know if the filmmaker intended this, but that even these bad guys, even if they're subject to, quality art like classical music, they can still turn out evil. But regardless, it's a good film. Ghostbusters at number 22. To me, that's more of a horror comedy. Yeah, but, there's science fiction elements to it, whatever. Super entertaining. I probably wouldn't put it in the top 25 of a science fiction list, though. I did see that at the theater, and because that, man, everybody saw that at the theater. It was just, you kind of had to. It was a rule. Return of the Jedi, number 23. A lot of people will call this the third or fourth best Star Wars movie of all time. The original trilogy, to me, is still far and away better than anything that came after it. So, Return of the Jedi, I don't have too much trouble having this as a high list. I might put it maybe in the 30s because there's some other films I like better that we're going to see here in a minute that I like more than Return of the Jedi, but all three of the original Star Wars movies are great, so I'm not going to complain too much. Number 24, The Last Starfighter. Now, you guys know I love this movie. You know that I'm a big fan of Lance Guest and Catherine Mary Stewart, and that I got to hang out with them one weekend at the Houston Arcade Expo, and they were incredibly cool. And I've been a huge fan of this movie since it came out. I love it. It's basically Star Wars with a video game theme. But at 24, I think that's pretty preposterously high. It's way ahead of Forbidden Planet and The Time Machine and a bunch of other films you're going to see. It's even ahead of Wrath of Khan, which I think is crazy. As much as I love Last Starfighter from a nostalgic standpoint and just from, how much I enjoy it, it doesn't belong at number 24 on the top 100 retro science fiction movies. I'm sorry. Star Trek number 2, Star Trek, what am I, Trump? Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. Everybody says, with good reason, this is the best Star Trek movie. It's action-packed. It's dramatic. Ricardo Montalban is a great villain. And, of course, Kirk yelling Khan is iconic. Number 26, The Fly. Now, I did see this at the theater, and I thought it was great. And I sort of just took it for granted. But just recently, within the last year or so, I watched this for the first time since back in the day. I was astonished by how well it held up. It's emotional. It's got a great romantic story. It's scary. It's gruesome. It's just phenomenal. If you haven't watched The Fly recently, or you've never watched it, the Jeff Goldblum remake, this is one remake I like better than the original. Now, I love the original Vincent Price The Fly, which I watched again last night because my wife and I are going to go see a Carl Struess retrospective at a local museum, the cinematographer for the movie. I do like the original Vincent Price one. It's a lot of fun. But as far as acting and pure drama and verisimilitude, the sense of realism, The Fly from 1986 with Jeff Goldblum is an absolute masterpiece. Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. Just by coincidence, I happened to watch this today with my son, and it was the first time I'd seen it since back in the late 80s when I rented it from Blockbuster. And man, the action scenes in this are great. It's so much better than the original movie from this series. It's just, there's so much better special effects. There's car wrecks and chases and amazing special effects for the time. It really pulls it off. It looks very realistic, and the practical effects, it is realistic. It's just great stuff. Holds up well, and so much better than the original. The original is pretty much trash. It's it really doesn't make any sense. It's just sort of, I don't know what it is, kind of a train wreck. But Mad Max 2 is awesome. 28, Stalker. I've never seen Stalker. This is one of the few on this list I haven't seen. Let me know in the comments what you think about this film, if it belongs as high as 28. Independence Day, I wouldn't put it at number 29. I don't think it's a great film, but I do think it's a lot of fun. The effects are great. It's humorous. And Jeff Goldblum, Randy Quaid, Will Smith, a great cast. Just a ton of fun. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek. I really don't think it belongs this high. A Trip to the Moon, that's great. You should be able to find that on YouTube or streaming somewhere. I highly recommend it. It's a very short film. A lot of people determine that this is the earliest science fiction movie. And at 1902, I believe it. That predates Edison's Frankenstein by 8 years. Yeah, very early French film. So yeah, check it out. Really fascinating special effects. Number 31, Invasion of the Body Snatchers at 1978. The 1978 version with Leonard Nimoy. Now, I'm a big softie for the 1950s movies, and if I had to pick one of the two, I would probably pick the 1950s one. But this was a spectacular remake, and it even has a cameo by Kevin McCarthy, who played, the lead in the original film. Highly recommend both versions of this movie. 32, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. I recently watched the Japanese version, the original, for the first time in many, many years since I was a kid. It holds up remarkably well. It's a great black and white film. It's very serious and intense, and effects hold up pretty well. You can tell it's cheap, but it's a great movie. Excellent stuff. The American version's not as good with the Raymond Burr footage, but yeah, Godzilla, not going to argue with that at number 32. RoboCop, number 33. You could make an argument that RoboCop belongs in the top 12 or 15. It's very emotional. 1987, for a movie that old, it looks amazing, like it could have been made last week. It's, the sequels aren't great, but forget those. The original is a classic, and my son and I did a movie location deal in Dallas, not a few years ago, where we went around and, took pictures. If you follow me on social media, you might have seen those. We love going to movie locations, and RoboCop's in our backyard. The movie takes place in Detroit, but a lot of it's filmed in Dallas. And as Dallas-Fort Worth guys, we definitely get a kick out of seeing the movie. And yeah, RoboCop it holds up amazingly well. That's one thing about some of these movies on here, hold up better than others. 1935, War of the Worlds. I went to go see this at a Revival theater on the big screen, and that was a lot of fun. The only problem was when the monster came out, when they show the creature that's creeping around the cabin, a lot of people in the audience laughed. And I'm like, okay, it kind of looks funny through today's eyes, but that was a little insulting because I love these 1950s films. I kind of take them seriously. I don't really blame them for laughing because it does look kind of silly. Look, I skipped right past Total Recall. Total Recall's at 34, before War of the Worlds at 35. Total Recall from 1990. Get Your Ass to Mars. I saw this at the theater and I loved it. Again, it's another work based on Philip K. Dick work, and it's fantastic. Not sure I would put it quite this high. I might put it at 50 or 60, but it's a good movie, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's great in it. He's action hero. He does a good job. 36, Brazil. Now, I tried to watch this one time on cable back in the day, and I need to try again. I'll just put it that way. I know it's a very critically acclaimed film, and I will get back to it. Logan's Run. It kind of amuses me to see this movie so high on the list. I love it. It's a nostalgic favorite, and there's a scene in there straight out of the Fort Worth Water Gardens, late in the movie when they come up out of the ground, and there's those waterfalls. That's downtown Fort Worth. They filmed a lot of Logan's Run in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, in Dallas, Arlington, and Fort Worth. They were just looking for futuristic locations, and they found several in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And it's a lot of fun, but it's a little bit of a B movie in some respects. I wouldn't know if I'd put it quite that high, but from pure entertainment value, sure, why not? The Iron Giant, I love seeing this in the top 50. When you think of science fiction movies, you might not necessarily immediately think of The Iron Giant because it's animated and it's ostensibly a kid's movie, but it's definitely an all ages movie in the purest sense of the word because it's it tugs at the heartstrings. It's emotional. It makes some really great points about just the value of being human and man versus machine and all that kind of thing. Highly recommend it. And I've watched it when my kids were little. They loved it, especially Ryan loved it. He absolutely loved it. And he would, when anytime we would meet some new friends, he would ask them, he's just a little fella, he would ask him, have you seen The Iron Giant? Which we always thought was amusing. That's a great pickup line. Great film. Glad to see it on here. Number 39, Predator. I always think of this more as an action movie, but it obviously is a science fiction movie as well, and it's very entertaining. Not going to complain. It's got some memorable lines. Arnold is great once again. Fahrenheit 451, 1966. Now, this one's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. It's a little cerebral, a little esoteric, but it's based on an incredibly famous novel that makes some really good points about censorship. So yeah, we'll no problem having this at number 40. 41, Dark City. I saw this a long time ago on cable, but I don't remember enough to comment. So let me know in the comments what you think of Dark City. Does it belong here? Fantastic Voyage is entertaining, and it's based on the works of Isaac Asimov, and it's got Raquel Welch, so those are some good points about it, but it's, I think it's solid, but I think it's overrated at number 42. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, a fun movie, but in a list of science fiction movies, I consider this more of a comedy, even though obviously it does have science fiction elements, but I would not put it in the top 100 retro science fiction movies. 12 Monkeys is really good. That's a good choice. Saw that on cable. Number 45, Escape from New York. Call Me Snake. I didn't see that till I rented it on VHS. And, still just a ton of fun. Again, I'm not sure I would put it in the top 50 because we still hadn't gotten... See, Forbidden Planet is over here. I don't think Escape from New York, when you're talking science fiction movies, belongs ahead of it. But hey, maybe I'm just taking their... Maybe I'm biased because I love Forbidden Planet. Number 46, The Abyss. I talked to a friend of mine that watched this recently, said it holds up. I haven't seen it since back in the day. Director James Cameron. You can't go wrong with Jimmy C. And for 1989, the special effects are just out of this world, so to speak. Number 47, Tron. Now, you might think being a big Tron fan, that I would rate this higher, but just from a purely objective standpoint, it's not better than a lot of the movies that are listed much down the way on this. It's a great looking movie. The script gets a little muddled at times, and I don't think it quite makes the points it's trying to make from a sociological science fiction, speculative fiction point of view. I don't think it quite always makes, I don't think the points it's trying to make always land, but obviously I love Tron and I have a great deal of affection for this film, but I think it's ranked a little high here if I had to be objective. I found The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms up here kind of an interesting choice for being in the top 50. I probably wouldn't rank it that high, but it's a cult classic, so props to the editors here for including a really great movie that not everybody's seen up here, so yeah, that's fine. Scanners is intense, and it looks amazing, and it's quite shocking for the time. For 1981, David Cronenberg. So I'm not... Did I say Cronenberg? David Cronenberg. Starting to get tongue-tied here, people. Thanks so much for hanging with me this long. Forbidden Planet, 1956. Now, this movie I would put in the top 10. I love this movie. It looks amazing. Yeah, the script is dated, and it kind of gets the romantic stuff is a little cheesy. But man, it looks amazing. It's a brilliant speculative fiction movie. It's got a lot of substance to it. It's a smart film. The first time I saw this, I was going over to my friend's house. He was gone, but his dad was home, watching this really colorful, really cool looking movie on TV. So I kind of hung around for my friend to get there, and I was 16 years old. This was 1983, and I start watching it, and I am just completely drawn in. I was fascinated by Robbie the Robot and all the different things he could do and how strong he was. And just in general, what an amazing film. Leslie Nielsen, who, long before Airplane, when he became a comedian, he was the captain of the ship. And what's interesting here, my favorite movie that I've got a lot of favorite movies, but I typically say Forbidden Planet. He's the captain of the ship. My son's favorite movie is Poseidon Adventure. And who's the captain of the ship in Poseidon Adventure? It's Leslie Nielsen. I guess the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home at number 51. A lot of people call this the Star Trek movie for people who don't like Star Trek because it's got a lot of humor. It takes place on contemporary Earth and that kind of thing. Very, very entertaining. Unfortunately, I did not see this at the theater. My brother-in-law and cousin went to go see it and did not invite me. Story for another time. That was very disappointing. Number 52, The Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie. David Bowie's been in several movies, including a couple of science fiction movies, fantasy films, and he's really a fine actor. Man Who Fell to Earth, critically acclaimed film, excellent, no problem there. 53, Starship Troopers. I remember Forrest J. Ackerman talking about this movie, and his favorite part was the mixed showering scene because he saw that as the way of the future, very progressive, which I thought was an interesting take. Incredibly entertaining movie, Starship Troopers. No problem with it at 53. Number 54, The Thing from Another World. I mentioned that earlier because I like the remake, The Thing, better, but The Thing from Another World is definitely classic. It's definitely, that and The Day the Earth Stood Still, both from 1951, pretty much emblematic of the 1950s. Number 55, Strange Days. I have not seen that. Let me know in the comments what you think of that film. Juliette Lewis, I got to see it because she's in it. So yeah, let me know about that one. Starman. Now this is a PG film from 1984, very different than Terminator from 1984. It's a very sweet movie, nice little romance. It's just really actually pretty touching. It's got a great script, and check it out, guys. Check out Starman if you haven't seen it. It's a nice little romance and science fiction movie. Check it out if you've not seen it. The Andromeda Strain definitely holds up well, and it's relevant today about a horrible virus that spreads out of control, and the societal turmoil at the time between the U.S., the Soviet Union, and China. Sound familiar? Number 58, Soylent Green. Soylent Green is people. If you've guys seen this, you know that that it's got the first arcade video game in it. Computer Space, very cool. Great shot at that in Soylent Green, 1973. And this film holds up very well, or at number 58 from 1973. You guys know about this, Soylent Green is people, and Charlton Heston does a great job in this. If you watch the movie today, it actually holds up remarkably well. It's actually a pretty serious film with a really beautiful ending. Love me some Soylent Green. Fifth Element is good, very stylish. My wife and I went downtown Dallas one time and saw this museum display of costumes, and we got to see some of the costumes from that film. That's some of the most interesting visuals in terms of effects and costumes that you'll see. Number 60, The Incredible Shrinking Man from 1957. I watched this when I bought it on VHS back in the 80s. I was collecting VHS back then, buying movies, and then later into the 90s as well, buying movies at Suncoast. And Incredible Shrinking Man, that's one of the best movies of the 50s, especially in terms of what you can watch today and still find fascinating. If any of your friends say they don't like science fiction, but you want them to watch something that's science fiction related, have them watch The Incredible Shrinking Man. My wife's friend falls in this category. We watched it with her, and she was like, wow, that was really good, and the effects hold up remarkably well. Number 61, Them. Another great movie that was like one of the first or the first big bug movies of the 1950s. It offended that whole paranoia about radiation and turning creatures giant. Them is just a ton of fun. And I saw this on VHS in the 80s. Westworld, it has a sequel, Future World, but I far prefer Westworld more, and I'm glad to see that it is on this list at number 62. Great movie about technology gone awry. Men in Black's a lot of fun. It's not one of my favorite movies in this magazine, but it may be yours. Let me know in the comments what you think about this movie. I just thought it was a lot of fun. You know, just when it came out, it seemed ultra modern, ultra hip, and ultra cool. I'd be curious if it holds up because I haven't seen it in a long time. The Invisible Man. I just watched this again for the millionth time for me with my daughter the other day, who saw it for the first time, and she really liked it. The first time I saw this movie, I was a kid. I might have been 8 or 9 years old, embarrassingly old to get so scared. I saw this at my aunt's house in Arkansas back in like 1976, around that time. And I actually hid behind the couch to watch it. I got so scared. Back then, we scared easier because the movies weren't as scary. And when you saw something that was genuinely frightening, it kind of freaked you out a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I was 6 or 7, but I'm afraid I might have been 8, 9, or 10. But it scared me regardless. Number 65, Mad Max. Not a great movie. It's kind of a train wreck, but it's classic and it started a great series. Number 66, Dune. Now, this has been criticized because the novel is so great, but I think the movie's solid. And it's cool that Patrick Stewart and Kyle MacLachlan's in it and Sting. It's got a cool cast. It's a sprawling film, and I enjoyed it when I saw it again back in the 80s on VHS. 67, my Superman at number 67. My parents actually took us to see Superman at the theater back when I was 11 years old. We didn't go to the movies very often, but we saw some of the biggies like Superman. It was a must see, and yeah, it definitely made me believe a man could fly. And man, it was sort of the template for a while for superhero movies until, the real grim and gritty stuff started. As a matter of fact, there really weren't much in the way of superheroes from the era, but it sort of showed you it was possible to do a superhero on the big screen and have it not be silly, not be, just camp or something. Yeah, it's got some campy moments and parts of it are dated, but man, Christopher Reeve is still the greatest Superman, and I love Margot Kidder as Lois Lane as well. 68, Time After Time, a sweet movie. Another one on this list that's kind of serious and kind of contemplative, kind of more aimed at mature viewers in the best sense of the word. Let's see, 69, The Rocky Horror Picture Show. Wow, that's obviously a science fiction movie, but I don't really lump it in with science fiction movies. I think of it as, a musical or, horror right there in the title. But yeah, it's definitely science fiction because you've got a mad scientist and you've got, people from another planet and all that kind of stuff. But I love it. In high school, we went to go see this. It seemed like every weekend we would, on a typical Friday night, we'd go out to a concert, then go see Rocky Horror Picture Show, and then go out for pecan waffles. Just a great time. Yeah, no problem with it being on the list, even though science fiction is not the first thing I think of about this movie. Galaxy Quest is an amazing Star Trek parody. Have no problem with that, even though I first considered a comedy, not really a science fiction movie. THX 1138. I've tried to watch this a few times, and I've seen this a few times, or a couple of times at least, and a couple of times I couldn't get through it all the way. So I've seen it all the way through twice. I just don't like it, guys. Let me know what you think. Yeah, it's George Lucas, and I'm supposed to like it, but I just don't. Silent Running is a quiet, just sort of a less action-oriented movie than a lot of these on here, but it's a good movie and it's got substance. I recommend it. 73, Barbarella. I love this movie. One of my favorite cult classics. One of my favorite campy films. Jane Fonda is absolutely beautiful in this movie, and I didn't see it until, probably the 80s at a Comic-Con. I recall seeing it in one of those movie rooms. I believe that's the first time I saw it. She is just so incredibly beautiful. Gattaca, that's a cerebral film. That was one that my wife even showed to her English class, and very thoughtful. I saw that at the theater. Yeah, I'm fine with us being in the top 100. The Truman Show, that's an interesting choice. It's when Jim Carrey started kind of becoming a bit more serious actor, and he wasn't all maniacal and crazy like in The Mask or The Cable Guy. But it's a really good movie, and it definitely is relevant for today. 76, Night of the Comet. I love this movie. I'm glad to see it on this list for pure entertainment value. It's got horror, it's got science fiction, it's got end of the world type stuff, it's got zombies, and it's got Catherine Mary Stewart, one of my favorite actresses. Interesting that there are two Catherine Mary Stewart films on this list. I love it. Turn the page to number 77, The Time Machine. Now, this one kills me that it's so low down on the list. It's got such great special effects. It holds up so well. It's so much fun to watch. That and Forbidden Planet are my favorite classic science fiction movies, and I hate to see it down this low. It's just a really thoughtful film. It's so much different than the novel, especially the ending. The ending of the novel, spoiler alert, ends up on a beach with these giant crab monsters. Much more hopeful ending in the Time Machine movie. 1978, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I love this version, Frederick March. It's the best version of the film. And you guys remember Champagne Ivy? Love it. Just my wife and I saw a retrospective on Carl Struess at the theater at the museum, and they had a screening of this movie. And I'll never forget that. That was a lot of fun. 79, Creature from the Black Lagoon. I remember, again, I think of this more as horror than science fiction, but yeah, it's got science fiction elements, and it's a classic Universal film, and the creature is very iconic, and no problem with the quality of this film. Sure, why not? Altered States is a great one. That's another one that was one of those 1980s movies that just seemed really cutting edge and really exciting at the time. 81, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. I haven't seen this movie since it first showed up on cable, and I remember it being a lot of fun. The Quartermass in the Pit. Here's one I saw, gosh, sometime in the 90s and haven't seen it since. Marooned, I haven't seen, so you'll have to let me know in the comments what you thought of that. I have no problem with Quartermass in the Pit, but I actually haven't seen Marooned, so I can't comment on that. Face Off, that's kind of ridiculous to be on this list, but I suppose it's entertaining. Repo Man is really cool. That's a lot of fun. 1984 was an interesting time for science fiction movies, and my brother was actually a repo man as a job, so that I kind of got a kick out of that. Later he became a repo man. Videodrome, that's a cool one. No problem with that. Now, I've never seen Existence, David Cronenberg, and I really need to see this because I love me some Jennifer Jason Leigh. Loved her in Fast Times at Ridgemont High and some other films she's been in. I've never seen Existence, and I really like David Cronenberg. They Live, I think that should be a little higher on this list. Fascinating science fiction film, sort of Reagan era. Love that. If you haven't seen it, it's a must-have. Cocoon's pretty good, no problem with that. The old Fountain of Youth story. And those actors in Cocoon are now, I'm older than them as how they were in the movie, and it's about a bunch of old people, which is really disturbing. Akira, other than Speed Racer, was the first anime that I'd ever seen, and it was great. I loved it. Great movie. Again, I rented it on VHS. Things to Come, that one I actually bought on VHS, and it along with The Invisible Ray are two of the very first, talky science fiction movies. Those are great. Now, Bride of Frankenstein came out before that, but Things to Come and The Invisible Ray are more pure science fiction movies. And so, yeah, that's an interesting early choice. Enemy Mine. If you haven't seen Enemy Mine in a long time, I highly recommend watching it. Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. A lot of it is just them talking, but it's really interesting. It's a great script. Love it. Number 93, The Blob from 1958. Now, this is an interesting movie because Steve McQueen is supposed to be a teenager, as is the actress that played Helen Crump on the old Andy Griffith Show. But man, they look a lot older than teenagers, which they were. And my good buddy Leonard Herman, the godfather of video game history, me and him went to the filming location of The Blob, and he took my picture posing in front of the theater. That was really cool when we had a convention to do in Philadelphia. It's not that far from Philly. 94, Invaders from Mars from 1953. This was one of my son's favorite films when he was a kid. A lot of kids love this movie because it's from a kid's point of view. It's very unusual in that way. It's from a child's point of view, and that definitely makes it great for kids to watch. Phase 4, I've never seen that. It says desert ants wage war on the human species in this unique sci-fi thriller that will perhaps leave you too frightened to ever have a picnic again. I like ant movies. I remember seeing a movie called Ants with Suzanne Summers with it when I was a kid. And the poster for that was just intriguing with ants on her cleavage. I'll never forget that. But I've never seen Phase 4. So you guys let me know about that one. The Day of the Triffids, that's a good British, I believe, science fiction movie. And I actually had to borrow that one from my brother-in-law to watch it for the first time years ago. The Running Man from 1987. That's a good novel or story by Stephen King, and Schwarzenegger is great in it. It's a great sociological science fiction or speculative fiction, sort of the game show from hell. 1998 or number 98, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. That's a Z grade movie. I don't think really belongs, but I know you guys. There's a lot of fans of that film. The Brother from Another Planet. I've never actually seen that movie. I'm familiar with it. Again, one from 1984. I've never seen. Let me know about that one. Although I've definitely heard of it. And this is an interesting choice. Attack of the Crab Monsters. Now, the original Fly movie is not on this list, but Attack of the Crab Monsters is. Now, I'm a big fan of Attack of the Crab Monsters. Roger Corman. Maybe they thought they just needed a Roger Corman in there. Beverly Garland is in this movie, and it's a lot of fun, but it's nowhere near quality, and I don't think it belongs on the 100 greatest. I mean, there's a lot of B movies, science fiction movies that belong on the list before that does, like Destination Moon, even something like Rocket Ship XM that's more pure science fiction. But regardless, let me know what you think of this list. What do you think of the 100 greatest movies according to this magazine? It's a kind of an interesting list. Some of the choices are strange. Some of them they really nail, in my opinion. So let me know in the comments, what's your favorite science fiction movie? Your favorite retro science fiction movie, as they call it? And what's your favorite one on this list? Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. We will talk to you in another video. Man, I am tired of talking. I hope you didn't get tired of listening. I appreciate it.